Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Erin, and today I am doing update number 3 for my No Pan Left Behind. So I will link all of my previous updates down below and maybe my last update up in the eye, but I am updating this kind of project slash challenge that I'm doing for myself. I'm updating every 2 months. And this month is super exciting because I was able to use 25 palettes in my collection over the past 2 months, and I was also able to complete a lot of them for No Pan Left Behind. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get into the palettes that I used in August and September. I'll scooch over just a tiny bit so I have room to pop up my pictures of my uses, but I'm going to go ahead and just start in the order that they are on my spreadsheet. And so the first one that I dipped into is my Natasha Denona Love Palette, and I did use 2 shades in here, and my guess is, because I used the 2 purples over here, my guess is I was using some of my ColourPop palettes and doing a No Pan Left Behind prompt on those, and I had some purple palettes, so I might have reached into this one to grab these 2 purples over here, but I do have, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more shades to go on this one before it is complete, and my focus for the fall is going to be my Natasha Denona palettes, so I am hopeful that we will definitely see this one completed in the next update. The next palette that I ended up using, and I used this in August, is the Yucca palette, and I ended up using these 4 shades right here. So of course my guess is that I did a look with these 4 shades. I wanted to take pictures of my looks, but I just, whenever I get ready in the morning, like I'm like go. I have to feed the dogs, I have to take care of the bunny rabbit, like I have to get all this stuff done before I log onto my computer at 7 o'clock in the morning. So snapping a picture of my makeup, I know it takes 30 seconds, but I have just not been good with it. So maybe that will be a goal for next year for this project, for me to take more pictures. But for right now, you guys can just imagine the type of look that I would have done with these 4 shades. This one might be a little bit of a spoiler as far as my buys and buys, but I did pick up the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette, and I did use 2 shades out of this palette in September. So I used this shade up here, and I used this shade down here. Again, I think I was reaching into this palette because typically I do looks with more than 2 shades, but I don't have disturbances on any other shades in here. So those are the only 2 that I used. I might have been reaching into another palette. I was also trying to do, I think I was reaching into another palette, but I did reach into 2 shades in here. I love this color story, but again, I've only touched 2 shades, so I have this on my radar to go ahead and use this complete palette in October and really get my feel for this palette. But overall, I love the color story, and I love Natasha Denona's formula and quality, so I don't feel like I will have any issues with loving that palette. This next palette, I was able to complete the whole thing and check it off my list for No Pan Left Behind, and that is my Pat McGrath and Bridgerton palette. And so I had to use 5 shades in this palette. I had used the blue in my blue eyeshadow prompt in Deck of Panning earlier this year in March, but I was able to go ahead and use the rest of the shades in this palette. I do love this formula. I wish that Natasha Denona would come out with more 6-pan palettes like this in the cardboard packaging. I just feel like this is a really good size. Her new palettes that she just came out with for holiday, I don't like that they have the blushes in there, and so I know that, of course, for holiday, getting an eye and face palette is great, but for people with larger makeup collections that, like, I wouldn't store that palette with my blushes, I would store it with my eyeshadows, and so I would have 2 blushes that would just be sitting in my eyeshadow collection. But this is not a review on holiday makeup, so let's go ahead and go on to the next palette, and this is my other Pat McGrath palette. This is my Darth Vader palette. This is actually, what is it, Sith Seduction, and I needed to use 2 more shades in this palette, and it was this copper one and then this more taupey one at the end. So I was able to use those 2 shadows in individual looks because those 2 shadows do not really go together, but I also do love this formula. These are a little bit darker shades, obviously because it's a Darth Vader palette, and so I enjoyed getting some use out of that one as well and checking that one off my list that I have used all of those pans. The next one is one of my custom lethal palettes, and I only reached into 1 shade in this palette, and that was this green down here. A lot of times, especially if I do my makeup in the morning and then I'm going to film a video later on in the day, I'll touch up the shimmer on my lid. And so this was probably whenever I was using another green palette in my collection and I wanted to just add a little pizzazz to my lid, and the lethal shades are absolutely gorgeous. The lethal palettes are actually sitting behind me on my little desk there because they are the next focus palettes for my No Pan Left Behind. So I am really looking forward to being able to use more of my lethal shades. And let me see if I can get that out and tell you guys what shade that actually is. So actually this shade here is called Cryptic. And so it is a beautiful green shimmer and I absolutely love it. So again, I'm just super thrilled to be able to use more of my lethal palettes coming up in the fall. This next palette I was able to use for a look, was it yesterday? Yeah, I actually used this palette yesterday, and so I was able to get 1 look done in September, but that is my Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde, and I have quite a few shades already used in this palette, so it looks like I only have, what, 4, 5, 6 more shades to use. And so this is going to be an easy palette for me to go ahead and check off my list in October, but I also am really looking forward to reaching into these more like purple and blue sparkly shades up here. This palette is absolutely beautiful, so I am thrilled to be able to use this and also to be able to get a really beautiful look out of it in September. This next palette I rolled into one of my deck of panning prompts, and that is the Too Faced Pumpkin Spice palette. And so I only used 5 of the shadows in August. The rest of them I used in July, but I did go ahead and I completed the prompt / goal of No Pan Left Behind in this palette in August. I love this palette. I am so disappointed that Too Faced did not do the tin packaging for their new holiday release. I think they're really missing out on the subset of makeup lovers that collect things because they're in similar packaging. And so I just am very disappointed in that. I do have another Too Faced palette that I was able to use in August, and I was able to complete my No Pan Left Behind, and that is my Too Faced Just Peachy Mattes. This was my pan that palette for last year, and I was able to make really good progress on this. There was 2 shades, the Peach Punch and the Peach Sangria. Those were the 2 shades that I had not used in this palette yet, and so I did go ahead and get those used in August. I absolutely love this palette. I love reaching into this whenever I need to use a more sparkly shade, or like the Pat McGrath palette that is just sparkles. I love to lay down, hi Pup Pup. I love to lay down mattes out of this palette, and so I am thrilled to have this one. I'm kind of sad with some of these, and I'll reach back into them. Puppy number 2. You guys are okay. Of course, I'm going to reach back into some of these palettes to build some looks, especially when I have my all matte palettes, because when I do have a shimmer that I want to use, it's really easy to, set up the foundations in my crease with this palette. In my current No Pan Left Behind prompt for Deck of Panning, I did roll in my Urban Decay palettes, and I was able to complete the Urban Decay Ultraviolet. I still have the brush in there, so I'll be careful not to tip the brush out. But this is what our color story is looking like. I did, 2 or 3 purple looks, and 2 neutral looks. And so the last look that I ended up doing, I did it with, was it Hacked, VR, Lucid, no, it wasn't Hacked. It was VR, Lucid, Optimized, and Euphoric. So I set up the matte in my crease, and I used this more satin shade to kind of build up the outer corner. And then I put VR and Lucid on my lid, and it was a very beautiful color, or a very beautiful look. VR actually has like some bluish green sparkle in it, so I think it layered with VR was a really fun look that I was able to do. But this is an Urban Decay palette that I'm able to check off my list as completed for No Pan Left Behind. And another one that I was able to get done is the Stoned Vibes. And I ended up using, what, I had 3 shades that I had to use to complete this. So I had to use Raw Energy, Bloodstone, and Jade. And I was able to use all of those shades in looks, and they were absolutely beautiful. I love this palette. I know Urban Decay is coming out with the Moon Dust palettes for holiday, but I really wish that they would do another palette with this same formula, because this was really something special, especially because we love these sparkly shades nowadays. I think that that palette would do really, really well. Another one that I was able to get knocked out in September was the Naked Honey. And so I had a few shades used in here that I used in February. This is our color story. But I did go ahead and I used the rest of the shades in September. This is very easy for me to use. I love these like gold tones, and this is definitely right up my alley, so this was extremely easy for me to use. I really love the shade Golden. This kind of gold shade is just absolutely gorgeous. So thrilled to have that one done. I'm almost to the point where, like, now that I need to focus on my Natasha Denona palettes, I'm sad that I'm not going to be reaching into some of these. So that's kind of my feelings on those. I do have another Urban Decay, and this is the palette that I have on my lids today, and that is the Naked Heat. So I did use a couple of these shades in May, and then here is our color story. So I used the shades that are marked for September. Those are the shades that I used in my look today. So Low Blow and He Devil. Yeah, Low Blow and He Devil, I used those 2 mattes in my crease. I put this beautiful shimmer all over the lid, and then I kind of buffed everything out with Ounce. And again, I love these warm tones. This is going to be so easy for me to complete the rest of these shades, especially because here in Florida, it is like hinting at fall in the morning. And again, because my day starts at 7 o'clock in the morning, I wake up at 5:30-ish to take the dogs out and to get ready. So it's still dark out whenever I get up in the morning, and it is almost chilly in the morning, almost. But it's like 90-something degrees out and so hot right now. So it teases us in the morning that it's fall, but I am looking forward to more cooler days and being able to open my windows and not run my AC constantly. So I am looking forward to that with the fall. But I was able to check this palette off my list, and so I was able to completely use the ABH Norvina. I did have quite a few shades that I had used in April, and then the majority of the rest of them I used in August. Again, I love this color story. This is these shimmers are just to die for. I know the video that went up before this one, I'll link it up in the eye, was like if I had to keep 10 palettes and if I had to declutter 10 palettes, and my ABH ones were on the chopping block, mainly because like I feel like I have the same type of shades in other palettes. Now that does not say that this formula is beautiful. I love this formula, but on the flip side of it, I just think that this is very repetitive in my collection, but since I don't have to declutter it, I will still continue to enjoy using it. And then another one that I was able to work on and get done is my ABH Sultry. So I was able to use this entire palette in September and in August. Again, this was on my chopping block, but I do love the shimmers in here. ABH is coming out with a 9-pan version of this for holiday, and I actually I like it, but the thing is, Cyborg and Slate and Noir are the 3 shades that I hear over and over and over again that people just don't use in this palette. And those 3 shades take up 1/3 of that 9-pan. I think that they could have gone a different way with the Sultry, and even if they would have put the pop of pink in there. I know the pop of pink can be kind of like, you know, controversial for some people. Some people don't get it, but I think that the pop of pink would have actually made it interesting. But hey, nobody asks my opinions. So I was able to use every single pan in my 2 ABH palettes. And so that brings us to my next category. And so I have my Viseart palettes. And so this is the Viseart. I'm trying to figure out how to hold it because they have the flip covers on them. But this is my Rosé Edit. I was able to use all the shades in here. I had used some of the shades in April and July, but the rest of the shades I was able to use these in August. And looking at this one with the purple shades, I might have reached into the Love palette to complement this one, but I love the Viseart formula, so I was able to use every shade in that palette. I was also able to use every shade in my Paris Edit, and this one I used every shade in August. So this was an August palette that I did. Again, I love these shades. This formula is absolutely beautiful. I do have a few of my if you have a Viseart palette, there's some shimmers in there that are softer and a little bit creamier. A few of mine are cracking a little bit and kind of crumbling, and that makes me very, very sad because I love that formula, but I think that that just comes with a formula that starts out extremely creamy and dries out over time. On the opposite side of that, I do have my Theory palette. This is a Viseart Theory Nuance. And so I was able to use what it would be these 4 here. The other 2 I had used in February. This is a more hard pressed shimmer formula. So this formula I think is actually more forgiving on like older eyelids that are a little bit more crepey, or if you have more wrinkles on your eyelids. This formula, the more hard pressed shimmers from Viseart, is very forgiving. Excuse you. It's very forgiving, and so I love this palette all the same. These are all shimmers. I can do a complete look out of this palette. I do not mind putting a shimmer in my crease when I typically do my eyeshadow, because I kind of feel like once I open my eyes, my lids disappear. I don't think I have hooded eyes, but my lids do kind of disappear. So I typically do put shimmers above my crease just so you guys can see my shimmer shades whenever my eyes are open. So I personally do not mind putting a shimmer in my crease. Let's see here. Oh, next palette that I ended up using. So I did 1 or 2 looks, probably 2 looks, I think, by looking at the shades. Maybe that was, no, I think I did 2 different looks with this palette, but I took shimmers from other palettes, and so it's in a Z palette, but this is my ColourPop So Jaded palette. I took out the shades that I didn't like, and so this is the color story that I will get more use out of, and plus I wanted it in a smaller palette, and so I did use this shade, this shade, this shade, and this shade. The rest of them I used in June and July, but this one is currently on the top of my desk as a focus palette as well, and so I probably only have 1 or 2 more looks, no, 2 or 3 more looks, because I'm not mixing the greens with the purples, but I probably have about 2 or 3 more looks to do with this palette before I can also check this one off my list. But I still love this color story, and I love it even more that I depotted it and put it in its own palette and kind of rearranged the shades to make sense for me. Now we are on to the ColourPop segment for the rest of the video, because I have 5 of my 9 pans that I was able to use every shade, and that was part of my No Pan Left Behind prompt for last month in Deck of Panning. And so the first one that I have popping up here is It's My Pleasure palette. So I was able to use all of these shades in August and September. I absolutely love this color story, and I think, spoiler, but I think that I have decided that this is going to be my Pan That palette for next year, so that I can get use out of this one, and then I can buy myself a fresh one and retire this one. So I was able to use every shade and fell in love with this palette all over again. Let's see here. I was able to do the rest of the shades in my custom purple palette. This is all ColourPop shades, but I did have to use 3 more shades in August, and so these 2 and this one down here, I was able to use those as well. I love this little custom purple palette. Some of the shades don't work as well as I'd want them to, because this is the single of Earthshine, and this is, what's the expression, beating a dead horse? I don't really like that expression, but I've said in many videos that the single of Earthshine is not the same as the Earthshine in It's My Pleasure. So this was a little bit disappointing for that one shade, but I love the rest of it. So that one got checked off my list. I was able to use the rest of In a Trance, and so I had the pinks and the purples to use. I did replace the glitter with a shade that's kind of like Glass Bowl. That's kind of the purple to blue to brown kind of shifty shade. So that's what's in the middle here, but I was able to use these 2 rows in August. And then I have my ColourPop and Star Wars palettes. So I have my Child palette, which I used this one in August and September. I think that when I pulled in that one shade from Lethal, it was probably with a green look from here, and I used that Lethal shade to pop on the top. And then I do have the Mandalorian palette. This one was also on my chopping block as a palette that could leave my collection, and I kind of still feel like I'm keeping it for merch, but I was able to get some beautiful looks out of this palette. Everything tends to run a little bit deeper just because these 2 rows down here are deeper shades, but I still did enjoy using this one and reaching for it. And then our last ColourPop palette, and the last one from ColourPop and Star Wars, is the 3PO C-3PO palette. And so I was able to use I had to use 5 more shades in here, so I was able to easily do that. Of course, I reached back into some of the mattes. Even though I had already used them in March, I reached back into the mattes to complete my looks, because there was only one matte that I needed to use in August, so of course I did dip into more of this palette. But again, I absolutely love this one. I love the gold tones in here, so this one was not a chore at all to use. So if I am counting correctly, that means in August and September, I completed No Pan Left Behind on 18 more palettes. That is wild to me. So of course some palettes already had some uses on them. I did roll in my 9 pans and I knocked those out of the park. And so looking at my spreadsheet here, and I mean, I'll just kind of show it, but this is in my panning journal. This is what my little spreadsheet looks like, how I am marking everything off. But let's see, how many palettes do I have left that I needed to use out of my collection? So I have 18 more palettes that I need to use completely in my collection, and of course some of those already do have some uses on them. So if I was able to do 18 palettes in 2 months, I'm hopeful to do 18 palettes in the rest of the year. Of course, the majority of those are 15 pan palettes from Natasha Denona, and 12 pan palettes from Lethal Cosmetics, but I have total faith that I will be able to touch every single pan of eyeshadow in my collection, and I only started strictly tracking in March of this year. So that means in February and in January, I probably touched a lot more of these shadows as well. And that continues to make me happy, because the last thing that I want to do is feel like I am wasting my money on these eyeshadows. So I am well aware that I will never use up this eyeshadow before, inevitably it starts going bad. This is a part of my collection that I am very mindful about what I'm bringing in now, and I think I've only purchased like 4 or 5 palettes for the year, and that's like, I feel like I need to pat myself on the back with that, but I don't mind my eyeshadow collection. I know eventually this stuff will go bad, but through this challenge and through this project, I love that I've been intentionally being able to touch every shade in my collection. So I don't want any shades to be neglected. I want to be able to reach for them. Now, of course, I have my favorites that, sometimes I just go back to the palettes and use them because I love them, but I am enjoying kind of challenging myself, even to the point that if I have like 3 or 4 shades in a palette left, I will try to make a look out of that. So I love the challenge. It's kind of like an eyeshadow bingo, but of my own doing. So I really have loved this project and loved being intentional about it. I really hope that next update I will have tons of Natasha Denona palettes done to show you guys, but I really appreciate you guys tuning in and watching my update, and also being so encouraging to me. You guys have really been liking that I'm talking about being conscious with consumerism and being intentional with our spending and just impulse control. I'll link some videos down below that I've done on the topic, and just being mindful that when you want to buy the new, just remember what you have in your collection, and this has really helped me be mindful of that. So I appreciate all of you guys being here. I appreciate your kind comments. So of course, drop me a note down below. I love our conversations that we've been having. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on my content. Like I said, I just posted the 10 palettes that need to go and 10 palettes that I would declutter. The video after this one is going to be my update for my Project Pan, which exciting update. And since we have started a new quarter, I have lots of updates coming in October, so make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of it. Also, go ahead, hit that thumbs up button. I really do appreciate it. It does help me out, and you guys are so lovely and wonderful, and I appreciate you all. I'll catch you in my next one. Bye.